Oh, red. Okay, thank you. So I do want to go through this presentation pretty quickly. It's sort of the who, what, where, when, and why of the Collaborative Science and Adaptive Management Program. But I do want to reiterate what Reiner said, is that as we've been moving through this adventure, the Delta Science Program staff, the IEP lead scientist, have been integral to the process. When we kind of go in different directions and we're trying to figure out which way to go, we can use the Delta Science Plan sort of as our North Star, because we are trying to build a credible, legitimate, and a relevant science program consistent with the plan. So I'm going to give the presentation this morning. And the first thing is I need to give you the acronym lesson. CSAMP is the Collaborative Science and Adaptive Management Program, and then CAMT is the Collaborative Adaptive Management Team. And very simply, our governance structure is set up similar to some of the governance that's outlined in the science plan, that we have a policy group, and that's made up of agency directors or regional directors, as well as general managers of a number of the water agencies and a number of executive directors of the NGOs. And they are the ones that are responsible for sort of telling us what are these pressing management areas where decisions need to be made. And then the CAMT itself is high-level managers and senior scientists. We have a mission statement. Took several months to get it developed and agreed to, but we did do that finally. And essentially, it's that we are working with a sense of urgency because of the situation with listed species. And we're trying to develop a robust science and adaptive management program. And we're focused on implementing the biological opinions, but we're also focused on interim actions, so between now and when the biological opinions are due. But we clearly see this as a pilot for other collaborative efforts in the future. Did it go? Okay. Reiner went over the history of why we're here. There was a court decision. The court decision lays out what we're pretty much all about, and that's what was captured in our mission statement. And again, what this graphic shows you is pretty clearly the role of the Delta Science Program. So we have our policy group, we have our CAMT, deciding what our priority issues are. But then we quickly need to get to the scientists, and so we have a team working on Delta smelt and a team working on salmon. We call them scopers right now because they're really focusing to make sure the questions are the relevant ones that we need to make these management decisions. And then technical experts will be doing a lot of the work. And so the Delta Science Program, as a member of CAMT, has been involved in everything, but they're also participating as a member of each scoping team, and then they'll be responsible for external review. I just want to capture again what Reiner said, is that we are sort of building this car as we drive it, which is always dangerous. And so one of the things that we are relying on is the science program to sort of help us by suggesting mechanisms that are contained in the science plan. And then we can help the science plan by sort of saying, well, this worked or this didn't work. So it really is a very strong collaboration and synthesis. I'm not going to spend a lot of detail on this, but just folks have asked me, who is it that's actually on the policy group? And so again, these are the agency heads or the regional directors. And then here who is actually on the CAMT, and this is where you see that Lauren Hastings is an official member representing the Delta Science Program, although in the first phase both Lauren and Reiner were active participants. And then Anka Mueller-Sogler, as the lead scientist for IEP, has been involved from the beginning. CAMT, according to the court documents, is envisioned to have 3 phases. The first phase we've just completed, and that was sort of working together and coming up with a work plan that would improve the science going into the biological opinions. We have completed that phase, and we're now in the second phase, which is the period between the first phase and when the biological opinions are put in place. The third phase then is really when we get into the adaptive management of the biological opinions and the reasonable and prudent actions. I'm not going to go into detail on the schedule that we had for the first phase. It was overly ambitious because it assumed you had a group that was ready to kind of push their sleeves up and get to work. And I think we had to do a lot of the people part first in terms of getting to know each other and trust each other and understand the different expectations that we were bringing to this process. But we were able to achieve the goals that were outlined in terms of coming up with a set of issues to work on, sitting down as scientists and comparing conceptual models, and from looking at those conceptual models, what the key questions were and what the hypotheses were, and then pulling that together into a work plan, which was then submitted to the court in February. Okay, the good news is that we did get an extension from the judge. So that's an extra year for the smelt biological opinion and the salmon biological opinion, because the court believes that substantial progress has been made thus far, and so a further one-year extension was granted. So we're just getting started on phase 2, and overall I just want to give you some observations. It is even a more ambitious schedule than the first phase. And what we're trying to do now is develop scopes of work and then the staff and the resources that are necessary, in addition to just our 3 areas that we're focused on. Now, with each of those 3 areas, there's anywhere from 3 to 5 specific tasks. So we're looking at almost managing up to a dozen smaller projects over the next year. We're also trying to strengthen our communication, let folks know what we're about at venues like this, because we haven't done outreach in the past. And then we are really working towards reinforcing and building further collaboration. Again, schedules, we're all about dates. We have dates, again, that we need to get back to the court on. The court wants status reports in June and October, and then our annual report is due again in February. For folks that are interested in more detail, you can see all of the CAMT agendas and meeting minutes and documents and PowerPoints. Right now, they're just posted on the website of my organization, the State and Federal Contractors Water Agency, so swifca.org. Under projects, you see CAMT, and everything is there. That's it.
Thank you, Val. Leo, do you want to proceed, and then we'll ask questions?
Certainly. I'll just provide a few remarks. I'd like to just offer my reflections on this last year, what I've learned, and what I knew before this process started. So just these reflections on the last year of participating in this process, essentially. So some of the more pertinent things. First, the good news. It's always good to start with good news. And the good news is that scientists know how to address scientific disagreements. That's one thing I learned. And it should not be surprising, because this is what they were taught and trained to do for years and years and years. Define what the issue is, identify what we know and don't know, and find out ways to learn that. Once we were able to gather dedicated scientists together in a room, and not attorneys, not political scientists, not policy people, but once we were able to gather the scientists in a room and ask them to define where they agreed or disagreed on a specific conceptual model, in most cases they reached consensus on what they agreed on and disagreed on, and on how to address their differences. So defining disagreements offered the basis for progress, because it provided CAMT something very explicit to work on and something specific to study and to test. And so that was very important. The other thing I learned is that managers and policymakers work under different rules. In the case of CAMT, while directors and managers expected the CAMT members to work collaboratively, which means a lot of things like, being nice to each other, listening well, and all that stuff, when it came time to send the final CAMT report to Judge O'Neill, positioning among the managers and policymakers became evident in the briefs that they filed to the court and appeared to overtake the collaborative process. So this positioning, as I call it, created unnecessary angst and concern among CAMT members, and I do believe threatened the success of the process. Fortunately, it all worked out well, but the lesson here is that if we want our people to act collaboratively, then we must act collaboratively ourselves. Collaboration cannot be delegated. It is not a task. It is a behavior. I listed 4 things that I think are really necessary ingredients to make collaborative science work. And the first should not be surprising to any of us. People, time, and resources are needed to make it happen. We should not be expecting miracles just because we've created a science process. While some people may think that nature itself is a miracle, understanding it is not a miracle. Understanding ecology requires good science, and good science requires smart people. It's a laborious process, it's time-consuming, and it is fraught with uncertainties, as we can constantly hear over and over. To be successful, you need the adequate resources, they have to be dedicated, and they have to be committed to the task. Without this, there really is no chance for success. The second thing is, I just call be careful with setting schedules. It makes me very nervous to hear people say that we must understand or know X and Y. For example, we must know the populations of delta smelt by February 15, 2015. It's not going to happen. Given what we know today, our procedures and our technologies, you will not get a definitive answer like that. You cannot force scientific discovery into a Gantt chart, into a Gantt schedule. Scientific discovery is a learning process. It's not building a bridge for which a Gantt schedule is perfectly adequate. But having said this, CAMT is about schedules. In fact, now we've sent a list of schedules to the judge, and we're going to adhere to them to the best we can. And I recognize the importance of having schedules, but our schedule must incorporate what we know we can do, and it should also allow for flexibility. And if we don't do this, then we should be prepared to be disappointed. The third thing is an important part of collaborative science is managing human behavior. And good mediators and facilitators, as we were and are fortunate to have, are extremely important ingredients for success of a collaborative process. If you cannot manage human behavior, you will not have a successful science process, much less a successful collaborative science process. And then finally, an honest broker is needed. An honest broker to arrange for peer review of selected products, to provide advice, provide feedback. The Delta Science Program fits that role very well. The Delta Science Program developed an excellent science plan which lays a well-thought-out adaptive management process. CAMT has endorsed this process. Look through it. Several of our meetings were just dedicated to that. And we are counting on the Delta Science Program to be an objective, independent, and honest broker in the CAMT proceedings. Thank you.
Very good. Reiner, Lauren, any further comments? You don't have to say anything.
I'm an eternal optimist, so I think I'm hopeful that really, truly, this will be the start of actually getting critical momentum, of continuing with critical momentum that we've gained, and expanding using this process to actually show to other stakeholder processes that this could work. And it does require mature adult people in the room that are excellent at sharing and facilitating, like Val and Leo did. So I'm hopeful.
Well, I'm sure my colleagues have some questions, but I'll begin. First of all, thank you for coming, and we appreciate the the positive comments regarding the Delta Science Program, Delta Science Plan, and their involvement in this process. It's our goal, our hope, to be effective and to provide leadership and to help guide a better pathway for science, particularly as it relates to the Delta. As you've organized and described the organization, it's clear to me that this dispute arose out of the contractor's concern about receiving less water. So is it fair to say that their goal in this process is to find a way to receive more water? And is it fair to say that there is a need with the process, the biops are designed to protect species? So a similar goal would be to protect species. So if you have part of the group that wants to find a way to receive more water and at the same time have at least an equal level or greater level of protection for the species, are these two co-equal goals compatible in this process?
I guess that's a question for me. I'd first like to say that I don't speak for the public water agencies, but I can say that they are obviously looking for a reliable water supply, but they understand the importance of ecosystem and fish species recovery. And so we are implementing the co-equal goals, and I think we will be able to do that. But it's not going to be easy, and it's going to take time and resources, like Leo said.